Hello, I'm Khushi, and over the summer I read All the President's Men by Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. All the President's Men is a nonfiction book that investigates the first Watergate break-in and ensuing scandal written by Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. This influential piece of journalism chronicles Bernstein and Woodward's investigative reporting for The Washington Post. This book reveals the story behind the Watergate scandal, which all began with a theft at the Democratic headquarters. The story shows how the two reporters worked with various sources in order to uncover deceit in the highest levels of government, as the theft proved to be extremely complex. The authors convey various messages throughout the book, which allow the reader to understand the story behind the scandal. Throughout the book, the idea of a complex issue can be seen, as this case wasn't as simple as one where a couple of people were found spying and punished for it. Every time the reporters uncovered facts, they found that there were many levels of politics and that there were several people involved in covering their tracks. Many of the people who were at fault were very powerful, which meant that others were afraid to speak up against them. In a few cases, innocent men took the blame for acts they were not guilty of because they felt that it would help the administration in the long run, or because they were pressured to do so. The authors emphasize this idea thoroughly, showing the readers its importance. There are various themes presented throughout the book, some of them being freedom of the press, the dark side of journalism, and showing that such an act is illegal even if it is done by the president of the country. This book portrays a reality that all the president's men, as well as the president, were only supporting characters in the background of the much larger canvas, which itself investigates how the power of the media survived such a big constitutional crisis and White House scandal, which targeted the reputation and lives of many members of the media. The book is written in third person in such a way that it makes its co-authors the central players. With this perspective, readers see events as they unfold. Like the reporters, the readers have to unravel information from the informants to determine where the investigative story is going to go next. It takes a long time for the reporters themselves to understand how deeply the scandal infiltrates the White House, which adds to the sense of betrayal felt by not only those who worked in the White House, but also by the reporters and the rest of the nation. Woodward and Bernstein were on the verge of being fired rather than becoming legends on the night of the Watergate theft. The power of the press seemed poised to not only become a recruiting tool for future journalists, but a highly regarded First Amendment right. The outlook for journalistic freedom in America seemed bright and clear due to Woodward and Bernstein's influential story. It became something of the high point of journalistic integrity and purpose. Amongst the cynical view of politicians these days, it may be difficult to see that the president was actually considered a suspect for more than a year following the Watergate break-in. Richard Nixon was riding a wave of unprecedented popularity which led to the greatest landslide in presidential election history. For a long time, Woodstein, which is Woodward and Bernstein, they were viewed in a negative light as they were trying to bring down a president whom most people believed was sincere. I was surprised by the fact that Woodstein showed such perseverance to sticking to their gut feeling when even some of their own bosses were wondering why they should bother. Ultimately, the extent of the criminal behavior of the president was revealed despite his insistence that when the president does it, it is not illegal. This picture of the White House shown by Woodstein sharply contrasted the smooth, well-oiled machine everyone was accustomed to reading about. All the President's Men shows how much media can shape politics. This book focuses towards the ways in which the reporters were able to involve themselves in the political process and uncover flaws in their own government system. In a democracy, the media has various roles such as entertaining masses and serving as an informant. I think this book shows how powerful media can actually be. It can hold the government accountable for their actions. Woodstein's stories about the scandal put pressure on courts to investigate the crimes even further. For me, one of the most interesting aspects of the book was the give and take between the government and the journalists. As an accusation was brought up by as an accusation was brought up against the White House, a spokesperson reacted almost directly. In turn, Woodward and Bernstein readjusted the focus of their stories to fit what the White House had released. Watergate was extremely important in political history, along with journalism history. Many said that Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein produced the single most spectacular act of serious journalism, and that their work represents a milestone in American journalism. All the President's Men was an extremely interesting and informative piece of journalism that revealed the true story of the Watergate scandal through the perspectives of the reporters themselves, Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward.